us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God, help us.
Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Amelyan joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that the world should be ruled by democracies.
I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am. Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Why this cannot be fixed?
There are 425 million guns in the United States, which is more than the population.
The problem here is Trump has been able to make the argument that this is a political prosecution and that he's being singled out unfairly.
We defend our nation.
You are saying we could have a cure for cancer.
We'll have treatments for many cancers in this decade. And they're going to come from India.
Downside is that it could potentially wipe us out. But let's start with the upside first.
The upsides are absolutely enormous. The potential uses of this are almost unlimited.
I only discovered AutoGPTs about a week ago and started writing about them. And after I started writing about them, Jeff Bezos followed me on Twitter, and all kinds of crazy amounts of people have been contacting us.
The show where we get you the week's biggest stories from around this world.
What happens in the world and its nations?
South Africa,
in Samarkand, Uzbekistan,
from New York or Riyadh,
creates ripples across oceans.
Things appear to be quite tense.
Hello, a warm welcome to WION World is One, broadcasting live from London this hour. Let's get straight to the headlines today. Chinese President Xi Jinping will not be attending the G20 summit in the Indian capital. Beijing says Premier Li Qiang will be representing China on Xi's behalf. No reason has been given by the Foreign Ministry. Turkish inflation numbers near the 60% mark. Pressure now high on the central bank to further hike interest rates, something President Erdogan is not in favour of. Leaders start arriving at the first Africa Climate Summit. The big meet is taking place in the Kenyan capital. A 3-day summit to focus on climate change, financing, and the unity of the continent. Days after a very successful moon land, the soft land on the lunar surface. Arsenal come from a goal down to beat Manchester United in a thriller at Emirates in the Premier League. Gunners' record signing Declan Rice stars with his maiden goal in stoppage time.
It's another late Arsenal winning goal for sure. For the United players, to a man pretty much.
We start with the G20 summit today because all eyes will be on the crucial summit this week. Several world leaders will gather and discuss key issues on the global economy. But the meet in New Delhi is not aloof from its challenges. It will be a test for New Delhi as a delicate game of diplomacy plays out. Well, ahead of the summit, the UK-India trade deal seems to be in jeopardy. This as the road ahead for the much anticipated deal is still not quite clear. Well, a report by the UK-based media outlet The Guardian reveals that the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has ruled out a quick fix trade deal with India. This means a deal before the Leaders' Summit is not possible. In fact, it is believed that a deal will only be reached in 2024 after both the nations go to the polls. Now, things aren't well when it comes to India-Canada trade ties as well. So, in a very unexpected move, Canada has announced a pause on trade talks with India. And this too just ahead of the G20 summit, which the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be attending. Just 3 months ago, both nations agreed to seal an initial agreement this year. However, no explanation has been given by the Canadian side of why the decision to halt the talks has been taken. Meanwhile, political indifferences also loom over the summit. After all the ministerial meetings that have taken place this year in India, no joint statements have been issued by the nations. The reason being that the differences over the war in Ukraine will take centre stage. Due to polarised views over the issue, no common language has been decided on this. And as we get these updates, the fourth and final meeting of the G20 summit is underway in the North Indian state of Haryana. It remains to be seen if there will be a joint declaration this time, but that's what everyone will be watching for, a joint decision on what's to be done over the situation in Ukraine. Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who will be attending the nation in the G20 summit, he has categorically said that he will block the summit's final declaration if it does not reflect Russia's stand on Ukraine. Well, last year, Russia agreed to certain texts regarding the Ukraine conflict in the declaration, and this was at the Bali G20 summit. However, though, it withdrew from this year. Okay, and lastly, there's the question over whether the Chinese President Xi Jinping will attend the summit at all, or will he not, and therefore undermine the whole thing? Now, China has confirmed that Xi Jinping will not attend, so we're not expecting him to attend anyway, but the Premier Li Qiang will be there instead, so there will be a representative. Beijing has not given any reason, though, behind this particular decision.
At the invitation of the Government of Republic of India, State Council Premier Li Qiang will attend the 18th Summit of the Leaders of the Group of 20 in New Delhi, India from September 9th to 10th.
Well, to talk about what to expect from the summit and plenty on the table for discussion, we've got the correspondent Ollie Barrett joining us live from London. So already there seems to be some sort of conflicts. We know Xi Jinping will not be attending. What else can we expect to be top of the agenda other than Ukraine, of course, which will no doubtably take centre stage?
Yeah, certainly the issue of Ukraine is going to lead to a lot of divisions behind the scenes. India will clearly be hoping that it can reach agreements in other issues and make progress on a series of other issues between the G20 nations. But clearly the issue of Ukraine is going to take a lot of the headlines. We heard US President Joe Biden describing himself as disappointed that the Chinese President Xi Jinping may not be in attendance. Of course, Russian President Vladimir Putin won't be attending in person either. India is certainly stressing that it's not completely unprecedented for some of the leaders of the G20 countries not to attend these summits in person. From a UK perspective, you mentioned that issue around UK-India trade, and certainly from the UK side there had been a hope, I think, in and around Downing Street that perhaps a trade deal with India could have been reached before the summit, or indeed could even have been announced while UK UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was in India, but that now looking very unlikely indeed, according to all of the briefings that we're getting from UK officials here in London.
Which will be extremely disappointing for Rishi Sunak, because he's relying on something tangible to come out of this, to come home and almost boast about and prove that the Tories can make these huge international trade deals after the disappointment with the US one not coming to fruition.
Yeah, one of the issues we understand is that there are areas that the UK and India actually do have agreement on, essentially, issues around, for example, removing tariffs on things like British whiskey heading towards the Indian market, for example. But what we understand is that while India might be ready to do a quick fix or a temporary deal on some of these limited areas, what the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his administration want to find is an overarching trade deal, and that clearly isn't ready yet. The two sides haven't reached agreement on many issues, and we know that there has been some hold up from the UK side on things like visas and opening up work permits for Indian workers into the UK economy. That is something that is very controversial domestically here in the UK when it comes to issues around immigration. So that is potentially one of the things holding the broader trade deal up. I think what the UK side is worried about is that if you do some kind of limited quick fix trade deal, then what actually might happen is that you never end up reaching the broad overarching trade deal that they see as the ultimate prize. So for now, certainly there doesn't seem to be much prospect of that trade deal being reached, and that is, as you say, politically difficult for a Prime Minister who wants to point to things like that as a success that can be reached post-Brexit for the UK. But certainly we understand that the UK side is holding things up at the moment, not wanting to go ahead with that quick fix trade deal, although we should say that another round of talks between the UK and India is getting underway this week, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility that some kind of progress could be pointed to ahead of that G20 summit this weekend.
Okay, so still some hope there for some form of a trade deal potentially, and as you rightly point out, in these post-Brexit times, more important than ever before to get these global trade deals. Okay, thank you so much. That's Ollie Barrett there joining us live from London, talking about the key issues to be on the table for the G20 leaders this week. We've got that UK-India trade deal potentially coming to fruition, and of course Ukraine taking centre stage as well. Thank you. Well, talking of Ukraine, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that he is replacing the Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov. He termed the move as a new approach in the ministry. He has nominated Rustem Umerov to replace Reznikov. Umerov is a Crimean. He is an ethnic group native to Crimea who has been head of the state property fund since last year. That's been his role so far. Now, since he's particularly known through this role in Ukraine, where the process of privatization has been plagued by corruption. So now let's maybe learn a little bit more about him and maybe break down some of the details about this person who has very crucial, important role. So Rustem Umerov was born in the Soviet Uzbekistan, the country his family was exiled to, and that was under Stalin. He then moved back to Crimea in Ukraine as a child when the Tatars were allowed to return, and that was in the 1980s and 1990s. Now, a member of the Turkic people who are the descendants of the Tatars who ruled Central Asia in the 14th century. The 41-year-old started out in the telecoms business, and that was in 2004. He was elected to Parliament in 2019, where he served as a co-chair of the Crimea Platform, an international diplomat effort, 2019 annexation of the peninsula. Well, he worked for years as an advisor to the historic leader of the Crimean Tatars. He was also part of Ukraine's delegation in negotiations with Russia in the first weeks of the war and participated in talks on establishing an export corridor for Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea. He's held the position of head of the State Property Fund since September 2021.
During his nightly address to the nation Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced plans to dismiss Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov from his post. Zelensky said he planned to ask Parliament this week to replace him with Rustem Umerov, who heads Ukraine's main privatization fund. The move sets the stage for the biggest shakeup of Ukraine's defense establishment since the war was launched by Russia in February 2022. Reznikov, who was named defense minister in November 2021, has helped secure billions of dollars of Western military aid to help the war effort. But he has been dogged by graft allegations surrounding his ministry, which he described as smears. The change of defense minister must be approved by Parliament, which Zelensky said he expects to happen. Umerov has headed Ukraine's state property fund since September 2022 and has played a role in sensitive wartime negotiations.
The British Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, is being accused of abandoning children affected by the concrete crisis in the UK. Well, this is as the government admitted the fact that there won't be any extra funding for this, for the education budget to cover the repairs costs and the closures. So, well, let's just break this down for you. The government said that it will not be covering additional costs like transportation and catering, as several schools are now shutting their buildings. And of course, at this time of the year in the UK, children are actually going back to school this week. And this is as they prepare to relocate children to other spaces as they begin their new term. Now, this issue is increasingly gaining attention in the UK Parliament, especially after the Chancellor vowed to spend what it takes to deal with the crumbling school buildings. He also said that the United Kingdom government will move to fix the unsafe infrastructure quickly. But to everyone's surprise, the statement was later, by the UK Treasury sources, was actually taken back. They said that any such funding will only come from the existing budgets for buildings and not from any additional funds. So it was refuted. Now, these statements led to the Labour union leader and others to demand clarity from the government. A bit of confusion here. Clarity as to who will be paying for the consequences from these reinforced, autoclaved, aerated concrete, or as they're known, RAAC crisis. Now, this is a lightweight form of concrete. According to the UK government, it was earlier used to build roofs, schools and colleges and other buildings from the 1950s right through to the mid-1990s, but later it was found to be at risk of collapse. Now, as the RAC crisis continues, the Tory former Home Secretary Priti Patel said that the government should step up in offering money to the schools which are majorly suffering. Patel also has 5 schools shutting down because of this in her situation in her Essex constituency. Now, talking about the burden this crisis is placing on schools, she further said, and I'm quoting this here right now, she said, many of the affected schools are maintained local authority schools and single academy trusts, which cannot afford the cost of repairs. It is also unrealistic to place a funding burden on local councils, which are already feeling the brunt of national policy costs. Now, General Secretary of the National Education Union also emphasised the fact that the government should cover all the costs. People also reportedly taunted Hunt on this promise of where he said he would do whatever it took, because as we've lately found out, that's not necessarily possible.
And you know, that really helped me. Give you a kiss and leave.
Okay, we're now going to stay with UK news just now and talk about a reshuffle that has been going on in the Labour Party. So let's get you some of the details here. So the UK's cabinet reshuffle saga, as we know, and that is to do with the Tory party. Now we're, of course, talking about the Labour Party. So the UK's cabinet reshuffle saga has now reached the opposition party this time. So we're talking about the Labour Party, not the Tories. Now, the chief, Keir Starmer, is now expected to undertake a major rejig of his cabinet. Now, political experts across the UK are discussing a possible role for the deputy leader, and that is Angela Rayner. She is elected as the deputy leader by the Labour Party members. So no matter what the reshuffle holds for her, she gets to keep her current job. Starmer is also not expected to swap his most senior colleagues, and this includes the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Health Secretary as well, Wes Streeting, and the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Now, some reports suggest the chair of the Parliament's Business Committee, Darren Jones, may get a promotion. Labour has still not appointed anyone to shadow the government's new Science, Innovation and Technology Secretary role. But some predict that Jones could be the right person to do this, as earlier he has voiced his support for artificial intelligence and discussed how it can improve the UK's education and NHS. Well, today's reshuffle will also mark Sue Gray's first day as Starmer's Chief of Staff. Now, recently, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also started his cabinet reshuffle. So he's the Tory party. Now, Sunak replaced the former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace with Grant Shapps, and Shapps' position is being filled by an Indian origin Conservative MP. Sunak's ally, Claire Coutinho, who reportedly has roots in Goa and Pune, is now the UK's Energy and Net Zero Secretary. Now, in the coming months, Sunak is expected to carry a wider government reshuffle. In October, both the parties are holding annual party conferences as both the party leaders hope to be ready with their best team before the general election.
We're already hiring thousands more doctors and nurses. But Mr. Speaker, he talks about the rest. Last year, when everyone else in the public sector had a public sector pay freeze, Mr. Speaker, we're already investing billions more in the NHS. We're already hiring thousands more doctors and nurses. But
in recent times, Russia's landscape has been changing dramatically, and it's not just about geography this time, or geopolitics, we should say, because since February 2022, an alarming trend has been emerging, a mass exodus of young, educated Russians leaving their homeland in pursuit of brighter prospects abroad. Well, data reveals that some critical demographic trends associated with this exodus, an overwhelming 86% of those leaving Russia are under the age of 45, with nearly 80% holding college degrees. Well, as a result, the proportion of workers under the age of 35 in the labour force has dropped to an all-time low, standing at less than 30%. Well, the consequences of this brain drain, as it's known, are now evident. A record labour shortage is affecting various sectors, with 42% of industrial firms struggling to find enough workers in recent months. And this departure of skilled professionals carries serious economic implications. Without adequate replacements, coupled with declining birth rates, Russia's economic prospects are anticipated to decline significantly. Well, the Atlantic Council has estimated that Russia's GDP, as measured by purchasing power parity, could fall behind Indonesia by 2026, 2 years earlier than originally projected. While Western sanctions play a role, the core driver of this shift is the departure of Russia's educated professional class. Okay, we have a big update from Indian space research organization's Chandrayaan-3's Lunar mission. So ISRO is now stated that the Vikram lander has successfully undergone a hop experiment. The lander is currently on the moon's south pole. ISRO posted on X, formerly known as Twitter as we know, saying, and I'm quoting here, Vikram lander exceeded its mission objectives. It successfully underwent a hop experiment. On command, it fired the engines, elevated itself by about 40 centimeters as expected, and landed safely at a distance of 30 to 40 centimeters away. Now, why is this hop experiment important? So the ability to execute soft landings and launch spacecraft multiple times is essential. It's important for ensuring the safe return of astronauts to Earth in future missions, obviously crucial. Now, ISRO says that it will serve as a crucial step in advancing technology for future sample return and human missions. Now, furthermore, ISRO has also provided an update on the health of the Vikram lander. India's space agency confirmed that all systems performed nominally and remained in good health throughout the experiment. It added that the ramp and lander payloads, the Chase and the Ilsa, folded back and redeployed successfully after the Hawk experiment. Now, both the Vikram lander and the Pragyan rover will now be on sleep mode. With this, Israel hopes that they would come back to life, and this will happen on September 22nd when the sun rises again. Oh, what a day it was for football yesterday, because two of England's biggest football names produced a classic on Sunday, with Arsenal beating Manchester United 3-1 at the Emirates in London. The Gunners, they scored twice, and this was in added time, and United boss Erik ten Hag blamed the referring errors for the loss. Well, okay, let's have a look, because he was blaming the referees as usual. There was a time. Let's have a look and break this all down for you.
That's remarkable. Incredible.
Okay, so both these teams now are aiming to keep pace with Manchester City, and that's why it's so important that these two win. Okay, so as we know, the Gunners came out victorious because the Gunners had the first real chance of the game, and this was in the 13th minute, but Kai Havertz's poor form continued as he scuffed his shot with the goal at his mercy. United made Arsenal pay, with Marcus Rashford making a determined run into the box and slotting past Aaron Ramsdale in the 27th minute. Well, the Arsenal response was emphatic as a slick passing move ended with captain Martin Odegaard sweeping past Andre Onana. A minute later, Arsenal were awarded a penalty on the hour, and this went down inside the box after the VAR intervened and the referee, Anthony Taylor, reversed his decision after a visit to the monitor. United thought they had grabbed a late winner when substitute came on and cleared past in the 88th minute. Arsenal looked to be dropping points at home for the second straight game when the summer signing Declan Rice smashed home his first goal in the 96th minute, with the ball taking a deflection off Johnny Evans. And with the clock ticking, Gabriel Jesus profited from United committing numbers at the other end to score past Onana and confirm 3 big points for the Gunners.
Martinelli just didn't come through for Odegaard. Miscue by Havertz, and then Nketiah flops his line too.
That's all from me today. Thank you so much for your company. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Goodbye.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
A new drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions.
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, its moral police is planning to drag it further back. And once again, the victim will be women.
Watch Gravitas.
And thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.
Did India threaten to ban Twitter? Either that or Jack Dorsey is lying to you.
That is Gravitas. We let life breathe through our show. Gravitas, the informed show for an intelligent audience.
Hi, I'm Alison
Lagrange, and you're watching E-Club.
Here are the nominees for Achievement in Music.